Imagine yourself wandering down a forgotten road just after sunset, the kind of path where every sound seems louder, every shadow deeper, stretching ominously with the last light of day. The air is unusually still, like the world itself is holding its breath, yet a faint rustle in the bushes keeps you on edge. The moon, not yet full but bright enough to cast a silver glow, hangs low in the sky, illuminating an eerie landscape where every tree appears warped, every branch reaching like a claw into the night. As you walk, a growing sense of unease begins to settle in your stomach. It's not the kind of fear that makes you want to run, but rather the kind that makes you hyper-aware of every detail, the way the trees seem to lean in, the peculiar silence that deepens with every step, the feeling that somewhere close by unseen eyes are watching. Your footsteps crunch against the gravel path, each step echoing louder than it should. There's a feeling that you're not alone, though no one else is visible. Just beyond the path, the woods press in tightly on either side, thick with shadows that seem to shift and move if you stare too long. It's the kind of night where reality feels fragile, where logic gives way to old primal instincts. You pull your jacket a little closer, realizing just how cold it's gotten. There's a chill in the air, sharp and biting, but it's more than just the temperature. It feels as though the night itself is watching, holding its secrets close, daring you to keep walking. And you do, feeling a strange, inexplicable pull that drives you forward, even as a quiet voice in the back of your mind warns you to turn back. In the distance, the faint howl of a lone animal pierces the silence, and a shiver runs down your spine. It's just a sound, you tell yourself, just some creature out there in the night. But deep down, you can't shake the feeling that this is more than a quiet walk at dusk, more than a simple, solitary night. The howl lingers in your mind, and though it fades into the distance, an uneasy quiet settles in, amplifying every little sound around you. The faint rustling leaves, the soft snapping of twigs somewhere nearby. You start to notice things you'd brushed off before, like how your shadow stretches longer than it should, twisting across the ground in unnatural shapes. The air grows colder and the path feels narrower, as if the night itself is closing in, urging you to keep moving forward, though you're not entirely sure why. Then, a flash of movement catches your eye, a shadow darting just outside your field of vision, quick and quiet as if it's slipping between the trees. You stop, scanning the dark. It's gone. You take a deep breath, telling yourself it's probably an animal. A fox, a deer maybe, but somewhere in the back of your mind you know it felt different. Too deliberate, too aware of you. Your heart beats a little faster, and your hand instinctively goes to your pocket where you fumble with your keys, the cold metal a small comfort in the growing tension of the night. You walk a bit faster now, trying to shake off the feeling of being followed, yet the sensation grows stronger. It's subtle at first, a quiet realization that each time you take a step, there's the faintest echo, like another pair of footsteps just a beat behind. You stop abruptly, and the echo stops too. Silence. The kind that presses against your skin and makes the hair on your arms rise. You strain to hear, but there's nothing. No whisper of wind, no distant howl, just that thick, unnerving quiet. Just as you're about to move again, you hear it, a soft shuffling sound from the trees behind you. Slowly you turn, scanning the edge of the forest, eyes darting from shadow to shadow, searching for whatever or whoever might be there. The light is dim, but you catch a glint of something, a brief flash of eyes reflecting the moonlight. They're gone almost as quickly as you spot them, swallowed up by the dark. You swallow hard, your throat suddenly dry, wondering if your mind is playing tricks on you or if there's truly something lurking just beyond your sight. You pick up the pace, walking quickly now, almost jogging. Your pulse races, and with each step, you can't shake the feeling that those eyes are still watching, tracking you as you go. Images flash through your mind, old stories, things you'd brushed off as superstition and folklore. But tonight, they don't feel like stories. They feel like warnings, ancient truths buried in tales meant to keep children safe. A whisper in your memory from a story you once heard echoes faintly in your mind. Something about the signs, the subtle markers of something not quite human, hiding behind familiar faces. Suddenly, you're struck with an overwhelming urge to look over your shoulder, as if whatever is out there might have drawn closer, slipping from tree to tree, using the shadows as cover. but you resist, pushing yourself forward, willing yourself not to look back. The path feels impossibly long, stretching into darkness, each step heavy with the weight of the unknown. And then, out of nowhere, a soft whisper drifts through the night, too low to make out, but close enough to chill you to the core. You freeze, every muscle tensed, straining to make sense of that whisper. It felt like a voice, something just beyond hearing, yet it faded before you could grasp a single word. The silence that follows is so thick it seems to press against your skin. The urge to turn and look behind you to see if there's anyone or anything nearby is almost overwhelming. But instead, you grip your keys tighter and press forward, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other, feeling the cold bite of the metal digging into your palm as a small, grounding comfort. The path twists and turns, each bend hiding more shadows, more stretches of darkness that seem to watch you just as you're watching them. You think back to the old stories, the ones you'd only half believed, told by locals who swore they'd seen things they couldn't explain. You remember something about certain signs, things people had noticed in the days before strange events happened. The stories spoke of sounds that were almost voices, of shadows that seemed to stretch and follow, and of eyes that reflected the moonlight just a bit too brightly, like the eyes of an animal. Trying to brush off your growing unease, you focus on the path ahead, reassuring yourself that it's all just tricks of the mind. But that quiet whisper keeps nagging at you. It wasn't just a trick of the wind, you tell yourself. It felt deliberate, almost like it was calling out. The air around you seems to thicken, and each breath feels heavy, as though the forest itself is watching, waiting for you to make a move. Then, in the periphery of your vision, you catch another flicker of movement. Something small, darting quickly through the trees on your right. You whip your head around, heart pounding, but there's nothing there. Just the dense line of trees, their twisted branches swaying slightly as if they'd only just been disturbed. You take a cautious step forward, glancing around, trying to catch another glimpse. Silence again, but the sense of being watched grows stronger, tightening around you like an invisible grip. Another memory surfaces, one you'd dismissed before. There were signs, the villagers had said, signs of something inhuman lurking close by. Some spoke of people changing, of behavior that didn't quite fit. Subtle things, a flash of irritation, a low growl that might be mistaken for a cough, a piercing gaze that lingered just a moment too long. You'd laughed it off then, thinking it was all part of the legend. But tonight, out here under the moon's pale gaze, those tales seem to echo back with a disturbing clarity. You walk faster now, unable to shake the feeling that something is shadowing your every step, slipping just out of sight each time you look. The trees feel closer, their branches forming an almost claustrophobic barrier that blocks out the world beyond. Your breathing quickens, and you start counting your steps, focusing on each one to keep yourself grounded. It's just an old story, you remind yourself. Just a myth meant to scare people from wandering too far at night. But then, up ahead, the faint outline of a figure appears on the path. At first, you think it's just another trick of the light, a shadow cast by the trees. But as you approach, it doesn't fade. It stands there, still and silent, waiting. Your heart thunders in your chest and you instinctively stop, every nerve in your body screaming that something's wrong. The figure is tall, with shoulders hunched, its head tilted slightly as though listening, though it hasn't moved since you spotted it. You swallow hard, your mouth dry. The figure remains, an unmoving silhouette against the dim light, and for a brief moment, you consider turning back, retracing your steps, and leaving this path behind. But something compels you forward, a strange, dreadful curiosity, and you take a hesitant step closer. Your footfall echoes in the silence, and the figure, still unmoving, seems to absorb the sound, drawing you into a strange, eerie stillness. You hesitate, every instinct urging you to turn around, to put as much distance as possible between yourself and whatever is standing before you. But something holds you in place, a pull you can't explain, a mix of fear and curiosity that roots you to the spot. The figure's outline sharpens as you draw closer, revealing details that send a cold chill down your spine. It stands taller than you first realized, its limbs stretched in a way that seems almost unnatural, like someone stretched too thin, bending in ways that defy anatomy. A slight tremor shakes you as you notice its hands, long fingers hanging at its sides, tipped with something that glints faintly in the moonlight, sharp and claw-like. For a moment, the world feels suspended, the night pressing in as if trapping you both in a strange, timeless pocket where nothing else exists. Then, almost imperceptibly, it shifts. Not a step, but a tilt of its head, the movement sharp, precise, as though it's finally become aware of your presence. You feel those eyes, though you can't yet see them, a gaze that cuts through the darkness and locks onto you, making the hairs on the back of your neck prickle. Your pulse races, and your breaths come shallow, as if the very air around you has grown thin. You're close enough now to see the faint outline of its face, pale and almost featureless, save for two gleaming eyes that catch the moonlight and reflect it back at you with an unnatural brightness. A sudden memory crashes over you, a snippet from the old stories. Eyes that catch the moonlight, even in darkness, never trust them. The words play over in your mind, warning bells echoing in the silence, yet you're rooted in place, unable to break eye contact. Those eyes are unsettlingly human, but contain something ancient, something predatory. They hold a knowledge that feels otherworldly, and you realize with dawning dread that whatever this is, it knows you've been watching. You swallow, barely managing to gather your voice. Hello? The word escapes your mouth, small and hollow against the weight of the silence, vanishing almost as soon as it leaves your lips. The figure doesn't respond, but you think you see the slightest hint of a smile, a cold, thin line barely visible in the shadow. It's a smile devoid of warmth, something crafted more out of habit than humanity, as if it understands that a smile is supposed to comfort, yet it twists it into something deeply unsettling. Without warning, the figure takes a step forward. It's not a threatening movement, slow and deliberate, yet it feels calculated, as if it's assessing, testing your reaction. The step is quiet, disturbingly silent given its size, and the sight of it in motion sends a jolt of fear through you, snapping you out of your frozen state. You take a step back, your mind scrambling for any plan, any escape, but your path is blocked on either side by thick trees and undergrowth, closing in like a dark, jagged wall. The figure takes another step, still watching, its gaze pinning you in place. You can see it more clearly now, its pale face framed by shadows, and you realize with growing horror that its features are disturbingly familiar, as though borrowed from faces you know. You try to make sense of what you're seeing, but the details keep slipping away, like trying to recall a dream that fades as soon as you wake. Its face seems to shift, one moment resembling someone you'd swear you know, the next moment, a stranger. With a sudden, terrifying clarity, you remember another part of the old tales, something about creatures that mimic the faces of those who have crossed their path, borrowing bits and pieces to blend in, to get closer. The thought fills you with dread. If this thing has been close enough to take on familiar features, it's been watching you longer than you realized, studying you. You feel trapped, caught in the steady approach of something that's neither fully human nor fully creature, something that's decided to reveal itself, just to you. Its hand stretches toward you, pale fingers impossibly long, casting faint shadows in the dim light as they reach. Your heart slams in your chest, and every instinct screams to run, to break free from this moment. But you're locked in place, rooted by fear and the awful realization that it's far too close. You can almost feel the chill radiating off its skin, a strange, deathly cold that's so close it makes the air thick and heavy. Your mind races, pulling up every old story, every scrap of folklore you've ever heard about creatures that mimic, creatures that feed on fear. One phrase surfaces above the others. They thrive on what you give them. Fear, attention, even your voice, all of it feeds them, lets them sink deeper into their charade. Swallowing hard, you realize that if you're to have any chance of escape, you must deny it the reaction it seeks. Gathering every ounce of willpower, you force yourself to step back, carefully, as if it were simply another person invading your space. You take a slow, measured breath, fighting to keep your expression neutral, as though the fear coursing through your veins doesn't exist. The creature pauses, its eyes narrowing ever so slightly as if puzzled by this sudden shift. It watches you with an intensity that feels like needles pressing into your skin, but you hold your ground, denying it even a glance of fear. Another step back. The creature tilts its head, watching, calculating. The air between you crackles with a tense, unspoken challenge, as though it's trying to decide whether you're worth pursuing or whether this game of shadows has lost its intrigue. You force yourself to look directly at it, meeting those unnatural eyes with a steady gaze, willing yourself to see through the facade, to look at it not as a threat, but as an illusion. Whatever you're looking for, you say, your voice calm, almost bored, you won't find it here. The words surprise even you, carrying a strength you didn't know you had. The creature blinks, a flicker of confusion passing over its face. For the first time, it hesitates, the edges of its form seeming to waver, almost as if it's struggling to hold onto the shape it's borrowed. The fingers that reach toward you drop, curling slightly as though uncertain. You see a flash of something hollow, almost desperate in its eyes. A glimpse behind the mask. Emboldened, you take another step back, making your movements deliberate, slow, as if to assert control over this strange encounter. You can feel its grip on you slipping, its influence fading with each passing second. The creature's expression shifts again, its eyes narrowing, a strange fury building in their depths as though it knows it's losing you, slipping out of its grasp. But you don't stop. Turning carefully, you continue your retreat, not running, just moving steadily away, keeping it in your periphery without granting it the satisfaction of your full attention. The air grows lighter, the chill recedes, and the shadows seem to loosen, no longer as close or as suffocating. When you finally glance back, it's gone. The path empty, save for the swaying branches and the distant, ghostly calls of the night. You let out a shaky breath, your heart still racing, but a sense of clarity settling in. Whatever that thing was, it couldn't hold you once you took back control, once you refused to let it feed on your fear. The path ahead stretches on, still dark, but no longer foreboding. And as you walk away, leaving the lingering shadows behind, you sense the weight lifting, replaced by a deeper understanding of what it means to face down the things that haunt you and keep walking, no matter how close they come. The clearing feels like a fragile sanctuary, the pale light of the moon casting gentle shadows across the grass, allowing you a moment to breathe, to feel the weight of your own footsteps without the heavy press of unseen eyes. But as the quiet settles around you, the events of the night replay in your mind, vivid and raw. Each whisper, each shadowed figure that lingered just out of reach, each step taken down this path with something both haunting and familiar stalking you, it all presses in, making you question whether it's truly over. Yet something in you knows that the forest's darkness hasn't fully loosened its grip. You can still feel the tingling pull, that strange sensation that started long before the creature had taken form on the path. It's not gone, but rather waiting, lingering in the corners of your vision and the hidden folds of the forest, like a spell only half broken. Even as you stand in this open space, safe for now, an awareness persists that you are marked somehow, that you've crossed an invisible threshold and things won't be as they were. The wind picks up, rustling through the leaves, a soft but insistent reminder that the forest lives and listens. The stories told by those villagers aren't simply legends meant to frighten. They're veiled warnings, filled with pieces of truth, truths meant to protect wanderers who might otherwise lose themselves here. You recall the cryptic lines you once heard. Not all who wander are lost, but those who see the shadows must never look too long. The memory leaves a faint shiver along your spine as you consider what lies ahead, just beyond the clearing's boundary. You don't want to linger here, aware that the clearing's peace is temporary, a passing reprieve from whatever prowls within the woods. You make your way toward the edge, ready to leave this place behind, yet your movements feel weighted, as if some invisible tether still binds you to what you've seen, to what you've encountered. Then, as you step onto the path leading away from the clearing, you catch a faint scent in the air, a mix of pine and something faintly metallic, a smell that sparks a strange familiarity. It's the same scent that lingered just before you saw the figure, a haunting reminder of the creature's presence. You quicken your pace, hoping to shake off the feeling, but it clings to you, like the last echo of a nightmare that follows into waking. Ahead, you can see the path widening, opening up toward the distant lights of the village. A comforting sight, one that promises the safety and warmth of familiar walls. But just before you reach the village's edge, something catches your eye in the underbrush, a glint of silver half buried in the ground. Against your better judgment, you pause, crouching down to brush away a layer of leaves. There, tangled in the roots, lies a small, tarnished locket, its surface worn, its chain snapped as though violently torn. You feel an odd pull, a strange sense that this small object holds a piece of the night's secrets, an echo of those who may have wandered before you. With a mix of caution and curiosity, you pick it up, feeling its cold weight settle in your hand. The locket opens with a creak, revealing a faded picture inside, a face you don't recognize, but one that seems to look back at you with a silent, knowing gaze. Pocketing the locket, you rise, leaving the forest behind at last. Yet, as you step onto the road back to the village, you can't shake the feeling that the night has left a mark on you, a reminder of the things that lurk just beyond the reach of light, waiting for those who dare to wander too far. The road back to the village is quiet, each step carrying you further from the shadows of the forest. Yet the weight of the locket in your pocket feels heavier with every stride. The village lights grow brighter, warm and steady, a stark contrast to the shifting darkness you left behind. But despite the comfort they promise, a strange sense of unease clings to you, as though the night hasn't quite let go. Once you cross into the village, the familiar sights and sounds should feel like a balm, but something's changed. Faces of the townsfolk seem worn, their gazes a little too quick to shift away as you pass. You're no stranger here, yet tonight you feel like an outsider, a traveler returning from a place they can't understand. The night's encounter has wrapped itself around you, as if marking you in ways that others can sense without ever knowing why. You make your way toward your home, past the narrow streets lined with aging cottages. Each creak of the wooden fences and whisper of the night wind feels like a reminder, a quiet echo from the forest trailing behind. Finally, you reach your doorstep and with a sigh step inside, grateful for the familiar warmth of the hearth and the flickering shadows cast by the dying embers. Yet, even as you settle, the locket's presence seems to pulse, a cold spot against your chest. Reluctantly, you pull it out, examining it under the soft glow of a lantern. The face inside is clearer now, but it stirs a deep, nagging feeling. You can't shake the sense that you've seen those eyes before. Not in person, but somewhere in the stories passed down by the villagers, warnings about those who disappeared into the woods and never returned. The locket feels like a remnant, a fragment, left behind by someone who wandered too far. Curiosity gets the best of you, and you open the small compartment behind the picture, feeling the brittle metal give way. Inside, you find a small scrap of paper, faded with age. Squinting, you can just make out the words, handwritten and faint. Beware the ones who know your name. A chill runs through you. The phrase is hauntingly familiar, a warning you'd heard long ago, whispered by elders about the dangers that lurk beyond the village edge. Creatures that could assume familiar faces, things that knew far more about you than you knew about them. The figure in the forest hadn't spoken your name, but you'd sensed its knowing gaze, as if it held some unspoken recognition, a quiet understanding of who you were, or perhaps who you could become. The room feels colder, the quiet pressing in as you fold the note and slip it back into the locket, closing it tightly. Questions swirl in your mind. Who had this locket belonged to? Why had it been left behind, half buried in the forest? The weight of the night settles deeper within you, as if its shadows have taken root, leaving behind fragments of memories that aren't entirely your own. As dawn edges closer, you place the locket on the mantle, watching the way the firelight flickers against its tarnished surface. You know you should feel relief, gratitude for having left the woods intact, yet the unease remains, an imprint of something unfinished. The forest, with its shifting shadows and strange watchers, feels less like a distant memory and more like a part of you now, a quiet reminder of the boundary you crossed and barely returned from. And then, as you stand there, a soft knock echoes at the door, a gentle, measured sound that feels entirely out of place in the early morning hours. Your heart races, a fresh wave of dread taking hold as you step toward the door. The thought crosses your mind to ignore it, to pretend you haven't heard, but some inexplicable force drives you forward, as if that last remnant of the night isn't quite ready to release you. You open the door slowly, just a crack, peering out into the faint light of dawn. Standing there, cloaked in shadow, is a figure. At first, it's hard to tell who or what it is, but then you recognize the face. It's someone you know, a villager, familiar and yet off. Their eyes catch the light, holding it for a beat too long, and a faint, knowing smile curves their lips. They don't say your name, but something in their gaze speaks of recognition, a quiet knowledge of where you've been, of what you've seen. A chill runs through you as you realize the forest's reach extends far beyond its trees. It has found you here, in the safety of your home, reminding you with silent certainty. The shadows are not bound to the woods.